This is Andrew Whitstadt, and you are listening to Heavy Board. And we're recording this on June 4th, 2025. My guest today is the author known as A.O. Wagner. Wagner uses his tech background and love of science fiction to weave together his trilogy of novels in the Karma Quintana series. The first novel, The Karma Sequence, appeared in 2022, with the next two novels following shortly after. Wagner gets honest in public, and he gets honest publicly about his spiritual and philosophical beliefs, his addiction, his recovery, and his journey to penning his trilogy of novels and more. And he's here on Heavy Board today to share it with all of you. A.O. Wagner, thank you so much for coming on Heavy Board.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
Of course, this is a pleasure. We like to start this with the same question we ask every writer that comes on here, and this is kind of, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? How did these early years start to form you?
Sure. Yeah. I had a very privileged childhood, really exceptional in the countryside, in a small village in Jutland in Denmark, with 500 villagers in the village, and everybody knew everybody, and not many cars, and we were very the children. We could run and play and have fun and play football and have fun in the woods and so all day long. So, and my father was a priest in the town, and my mother was a teacher. So I was from a very intellectual home with lots of books and lot of discussions about reading and authors and I had two siblings, a brother and a sister, and we often talk about it, that how privileged we were with that upbringing there in these safe surroundings.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting too. When was this? Was this the 1980s, 70s?
No, I'm 61, so this was the early 70s actually.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So looks are deceiving here. I did not think that. All right. So you're right there in the Gen X generation. Yeah, that's fantastic. You said your father was a priest.
Yeah,
What denomination? What
that's the Danish, the public church in Denmark, the Lutheran, the Reformed church.
Oh wow. Wow, very interesting. Very interesting. You said this was Denmark. This was Denmark.
I'm
So
from Denmark, yes.
yeah, yeah. And you're living in Switzerland now?
That's right. I've lived here for 5 years.
Wow, wow. And you said you had siblings and all. Were you the oldest, the youngest, middle
I'm the
child?
I'm the old I'm the oldest, but we are
Okay.
very close. There's around 1 year between us.
Yeah, yeah, I like that too. I'm the middle child, so it's always interesting. But I like when
Mm.
the dynamics between the siblings, right? Especially when you're close. Yeah, when you're close and you're kind of raised, growing up as best friends and things like that. It's very very formative.
There,
You said
there are some dynamics. That's for sure.
you said your mother taught. Was she a school teacher?
Yeah, yeah. There was a special school in our little village for people from all over the country, from young people who had what do you call it, dyslexia, and they had some special programs for teaching these young people. And my mother taught English and math actually on this school. This was not the public school, but a special. We call it an after school in Denmark, but it was like a youth education.
Yeah, very interesting. It's always telling. I think you're not the first author to come on here that said, oh, you had a parent that was a teacher. That stressed the
Okay.
books, the writing, the reading, the storytelling. The analysis, the literature, the philosophy behind it. Like the kind of teacher style. Being raised in that. It's
Oh
always
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's like how many writers have had parents that were teachers is quite a few, quite a few. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
okay. That's interesting.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is. So that's fantastic. And Denmark. I mean, everybody. here in the US, everybody they like to romanticize parts of Europe and stuff like that. Again, like you said,
Mm.
quaint little villages on like the, in the mountains or something. Everybody's in the
Yeah,
US
yeah.
is like, oh, I want to move there or something. Oh, that's like the, better life or something. So it's always interesting to hear that too. Um,
And it was actually, it was very, I would call it today, I would call it a very romantic settings.
yeah,
Idyllic is perhaps a better word, but it was really, I could wish for every child to have a childhood like the one we have, and our friends and comrades and everyone. This was ideal in so many ways.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I love an idyllic childhood. I love it, especially when an author is
Uh,
honest about it too. As I feel like there's a refutation or there's like a tradition or like a cliche now with like, the Hemingway style that, oh, he was, terrible childhood. His mother died and he was an orphan and he was addicted to drugs and it was just like, well, actually, no, like a lot of people had great childhoods. It's not true. It doesn't make you a writer to have a bad childhood. You could
you
have a
don't have
great one.
to exactly.
Yeah, yeah. It's just funny. And going off of that, we always like to ask, when did reading and writing come into your life? I mean, as a mother that was a teacher, I guess that was early. Like, when did reading and writing come into your life?
Very early. And especially, we always talked about, of course, our dad he made a sport of talking about the stories from the Bible, and so we knew most of that from heart, and what all kinds of books slowly got into the picture. And I remember very vividly one day then. I don't remember what grade it was, but at one point when I found out that I could read, of course I learned it in school and with help from our parents. I figured that if I could read a thin book, I could probably also read a very thick book. So I went to the local library in our school and I found the thickest book that I could, and it was Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I say, I guess I can read that, and I borrowed it home and started reading, and actually finished it in a couple of weeks or something like that. But I mean, that was my first success story with reading fiction and traditional literature, and also perhaps the start of my science fiction fascination.
Yeah, and that's a great read too for a young kid getting into that too. It reads very well. It's a great adventure story. There's constantly action, and you can kind of like it's thrilling to read that book, and it's also kind of high literary kind of. Yeah, it's a very good one to get in there. That's great. When did writing come in? Was that like? I mean, for most people, you're like, oh, I penned my first novel at 8 years old. No,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, no, but yeah, when did the writing come in? Would you say was that
I
later
was.
in life? Yeah.
Yeah, much later, I tried to. I always wanted to write some fiction, and I tried to write some novellas, short stories, when I was in my 20s. And then somehow I got caught up in a lot of other things in media, in computers, programming, internet, everything that all that happened in the 90s and in our century as well. And then I actually wrote in the late 90s. I wrote a couple of programming books, and that actually sold very well in Denmark. And then I figured that at some point I would try to write some a novel that was like a challenge
Right.
that I looked at, and I thought it's probably easier writing a novel because you have more like your inspiration and your what do you call it, you have more free framework that you can write
Yes.
within, because you decide what you want to write. But then when I finally got to it in 2022, I actually found that it was much harder writing, for me at least, writing fiction than writing nonfiction. which actually surprised me that it was such hard work to get everything, to get all the themes and the plots and weave it all together. That was actually a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, yeah. That's always interesting too, because they're, we talk about that on this podcast all the time. Nonfiction versus fiction versus poetry versus,
Mm,
versus essays, like there's these different styles and genres that are, you can jump into. They're not all the same, right? Like you could be great at writing nonfiction. It's a different animal to do, fiction or poetry or something. Be great
definitely.
at writing poetry, different animal to write fiction. You're writing conversations between people. Like it's not quite the same thing. It's a little different. uh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we're always fascinated by that, so I love hearing that it was such a different thing. But you wrote a few tech books, you said a few programming books. uh
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, what brought those about? Was that just like you were in the field and you thought that like this needed to be done? And
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much. I felt I had a fascination for programming and making systems work and communicate and making user interfaces that people could actually use to be productive. And then I actually read an ad in a magazine saying for a publisher that was looking for writers. And then it struck me that I could probably write a book. And then I wrote back and got a meeting, and we agreed on a topic, and that was the start of it. And so I wrote a book on a programming language called Visual Basic, which was very popular at the time in the 90s and the early um, 20 so that was I was very fortunate that the subject was so popular. So it actually the book became a bestseller in Denmark. But that was mainly because I've chosen a very popular subject.
right, and the tech boom that was happening at the time, it was all over the
Yeah,
world. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was a perfect timing. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's incredible. Yeah, we love hearing that on this show. Going off of all that, we like to ask, what were some of the first writers you were enamored with, or who are your go-to inspirations or idols, in the literary world? And anything goes, any answer goes for this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, after discovering Jules Verne, and I of course read all of his novels. And then I actually started the modern science fiction series from that, and going through the old classics with G. Wells and to our day to I asked the local librarians, if I like this, what should I read as the next, and they were always very good at pointing stuff out. And then I think it was, yeah, in the late 70s or early 80s, I found a book by Michael Crichton.
oh
The
yes.
you know
Oh,
Michael
we
Crichton, I'm
love
sure.
Crichton on this podcast. We
Yeah,
love him.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I love him too. And I've found on the local library The Terminal Man, and I've never read anything like it because the technical parts were so detailed and with diagrams and plots and so from that moment, so that was also like Jules Verne. Crichton was a milestone for me, and from then everything from the Andromeda Strain and going forward with all his, yeah, I guess all his novels, both the techno thrillers and the other suspense novels. And that was really important to me. So I compare myself. I wish I could compare myself to Michael Crichton. That's the genre I'm aiming for. But I have to be honest with me, and therefore also with everyone else, that I'll never reach the level or the productivity of people like Michael Crichton.
Yeah,
And after
absolutely.
that,
Please,
yeah,
please.
no, and then I also discovered Dan Simmons. And I've read everything from him and the Hyperion Cantos. I think I've read them all 5 or 6 times. I used those as a way to brush up on my German when I moved here to Switzerland. I read them first in Danish and then in English, and then because I knew the story and what was being told, I used it also as a tool to improve my German when I moved here. So I read all the 4 books in German, and that helped me. That was really a big help because if I didn't understand the words, I remembered what was being said, and in that way, that really helped my vocabulary when I moved here.
Yeah,
So he's also a big pillar in my inspiration.
that's fantastic too. That's one thing that, speaking of romanticizing Europe and all that, the kind of the American view of it, there is that the education system. That's one thing that at least the intellectual class over here, the chattering classes, the ones that constantly talk about these types of things. Um, yeah, everybody in the US is required to take a second language for high school, to graduate high
Uh-huh.
school and all that. And nobody in the US can speak a second language. Like that's what it is. Like,
Okay,
right.
okay.
Yeah, that's where we are with the education system over here. And then we look over at, I think, yeah, Denmark, Finland, some of these countries that have top tier, it's ranked highest in the world in terms of how effective the education system is. And I'm always like, oh, I'm had to read these books in German to, improve my language and stuff. I was like, I'm thinking of American student doing that. No, they're not going to do that ever. But that's great too. Yeah, that's great too. Crichton, we love Crichton on this show, so I love hearing that. Were you a Vonnegut fan at all? Kurt Vonnegut or
Yeah,
anything?
yeah.
Yeah.
I read, of course, Catch 22 and Slaughterhouse,
Yes,
and
yes.
and but apart from that, I was not. I didn't dive into that genre and that universe. But when we're talking that era, another author I have to mention is Philip K. Dick,
Yes.
who really inspired me because it was so. It was, of course, science fiction, but not in the maybe in the hardcore Arthur C. Clarke sense, but also with this paranormal themes and realities going through it all. So Dick was also really a big inspiration. Although it was a bit, I found it a bit harder to read, but
The style is a
that,
little, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. But then some of the stories are pretty original from that guy. Yeah, Dick's stories are pretty, as far as sci-fi goes, a lot of very big influence in that. Yeah. I'm just always curious. Yeah, I'm a Vonnegut fan, and it's interesting that too. He said Vonnegut didn't, obviously the big books and all that, because it's kind of a breakaway. Like Vonnegut was trying to elevate the kind of do more literary stuff with it. It's not so much like a thriller. You're not like thrilled when you read his books, but
mm,
they're interesting and you're reading them and they're cool and the sci-fi stuff, but they're not like that Crichton thrill, that you get
yeah,
when you're
yeah,
reading, like that kind of pulse thing that you get. Yeah, so it is a different style. I like that you mentioned that because it's important. It's an important distinction between all the
yeah,
sci-fi
yeah.
genre. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sci-fi it's a wide concept. There's a lot of
yeah.
subgenres in it. I just today finished reading the newest novel by Neil Stephenson, which he has also become one of my absolute top favorites. I think maybe I don't know if it's true, but maybe he's more comparable to the Vonnegut tradition, with very elaborate descriptions and a lot of background and of course he can be very technical. Stevenson in like in Seven Eves and where he describes, yeah, in all his books, really Cryptonomicon, and he loves the technology side, of course, based on his own background also. But I really enjoy and looking forward to the coming books in his Polar Stand series.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we like to ask that types of question because I mean, there's nothing like that feeling, when you find a writer that you really like and you start devouring everything that they've written, whether they're living or dead, and this kind of, yeah, there's nothing quite like it. And I like to say on this podcast, I count it all the same. I count, Stephen King novels in the same category as Hemingway. They're equally inspiring,
Yeah,
equally
yeah,
kind of giving you that what you're looking for out of a book, that feeling, that kind of, whether you're looking for just a quick thrill or something. Because yeah, I understand they're different genres and all of that too. Like I'm not trying to equate them, but I think it's not enough in the literary side of things. They tend to and I came out of the literary side of things, in higher ed and stuff like that. Like I taught college for many years, and it was just like they tend to disparage, the kind of the pop genres, the romance, the
okay,
science fiction, the kind of stuff like, well, that's not high minded. And I'm just like, but there's still books, like there's still books, they're still
exactly,
having that grip on people. We can't just disparage like half of what's being published right now because of some high mindedness that you have about what it
exactly,
should be.
yeah.
Like this is still like, and I mean, Crichton, one of the richest writers to ever live. I think he's like number 4 or 5 on the list. I think when he died,
Hmm.
his net worth was like 250 million or something, right below Stephen King and J.K.
Yeah,
Rowling. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
all, yeah. So he's, I mean, talk about a great idol to have in the literary world. This guy was so successful. His
yeah, yeah,
stories are
and
beloved. Yeah. Did
for a
you,
good reason.
I know it's American television too. Did you ever watch ER or any of his television stuff or his movie?
No, no,
Yeah.
that was never available
Right.
in Denmark. We of course we saw yeah, Jurassic Park
Right. Right.
and Rising Sun at the and some of his other novels that were made into movies. But for me, it was mainly the reading, and the immersion in this universe, and all the things you learn from reading authors like this. I think it's when you get so much out of it, not just the universe and the stories and getting to know the people, but there's also a layer of knowledge in different fields that you learn so much. Like, I mean, the psychology part of sphere,
Right.
for example. You if you learn from reading fiction, I think it's amazing.
Yeah. And it's interesting that there's a lot of studies in psychology now that talks about how people respond and learn better from fictional stories than if you just presented them facts or something, There's a
Okay.
certain types of brains that will probably respond to the facts, right? But most people want a little story around it and then they'll remember it. Then they'll learn something, even if
Mm.
it's fictionalized, there's that little bit of fact in it, and it just kind of does that. Yeah, that's always
Yeah, that
interesting.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I wanted to ask you about philosophy. Philosophy. What got you interested in philosophy, and who would you say are the most influential thinkers on you in that realm?
Yeah, that's that's a big question.
Yes, yes, we have big
I
questions
think.
here, and don't
Yeah,
worry about
yeah.
definitive answers or anything. Just we want your thoughts. Yeah, your thoughts on it. Yeah,
I think what started me on philosophy was, I think, the questions that we all end up asking, that why are we here? What is the meaning of my life? What is the meaning of anyone's life? And at a very early point, I posed the question. I think that I found out was also a central question in all philosophy, was why is there anything at all?
right,
And when you think about it, I say it all the time. You have to think about it 5 minutes. How strange it is that logically there should be nothing. Nothing should exist. No time, no space, no matter, nothing.
right.
Not even an empty void with nothing in it. But nothing. No time, no space. And so when you start thinking in those terms, I think you are. you have set out on a course that will never loosen its grip on you, because you will keep searching for answers to that question. And that and I've started by reading the classics, all the not in I mean on a popular level. I've started trying to understand from the old Greek, Socrates and Plato, and all through the Middle Ages, and over the German philosophers, like ending with Nietzsche and stuff like that.
I was going to ask, yeah,
Um,
when you said German philosophers, yeah, I was like, they're having kind of a comeback right now. They're not that they ever went
and
away. Yeah, Nietzsche's
yeah,
all
yeah,
over
I
the
think
internet right
Nietzsche.
now. Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't really understand why some of these some of these late romantic, that's not fair to Nietzsche, but also if you include what's his name, yeah, Hegel, and
yeah.
one of my favorites, who also inspired Nietzsche a lot. Now I turned completely blank. Okay, now I remember.
Perfect.
Sometimes, it's like, no, a guy called Schopenhauer,
Yes.
um, with his very dark vision on life. I've also taken that very much to heart, because from the philosophical traditions and the religious and spiritual traditions, for me, they have merged also in the realization. What Buddha said, that life is suffering, and that also goes back to Schopenhauer, of course.
Yeah.
That
The,
that
many
that
argue Nietzsche, yeah, with that kind of, yeah,
Yeah,
life
yeah,
is suffering
exactly.
is, yeah, like a summary of, like, yeah,
And that's central. I think that's, if I should list a handful of axioms, or phrases, I would probably say that on my, top three, top five, that life is suffering, and that is an insight that makes everything so much easier to understand. And that's also something that I try to stress in the book, in my books, is the difference between life and existence. Well, life, if you boil it down, you can say life is actually a biological phenomenon, and that in that sense it inherits the suffering, because life exists in an entropy where you consume other life, other protein, and at some point your life stops, and
right.
you die. And so clinging on to life, and having this attachment to life and things in life, that's also one of my realizations, is that is a barrier to your happiness and to your balance, to your awareness. If you attach yourself so much to your own biological existence, that every every time you meet some adversion, that you think it as unfair, and you are the only one in the world who suffer, and have problems with things that you try to do in your daily life, and with your body and everything. And when you realize that suffering is the base condition, then it becomes easier to when you face it yourself, saying this is not an injustice against me as the only person in the world. This is a base condition for everyone. And then and that leads me to my second axiom, is that I think the purpose, the purpose of life, or the purpose of existence, is to alleviate suffering of as many people as possible. If you can start with yourself, that's fine. This realization is a great first step. But if you can help other people carry the burden of life, and maybe detach themselves from some of the ambitions and the criteria they set to see themselves as a successful being in comparison with other people. I think that's part of my main mission.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, I'm so fascinated by this. Are you a Sam Harris fan at all? The
I,
American philosopher, the big books that he wrote, Waking Up, The Moral Landscapes, and
no, no.
he's like an American centric figure, right? Yeah, and he got famous for kind of criticizing Islam in the early 2000s there during the kind of Iraq War, the American kind of war on terror. He wrote,
Yeah, yeah.
but anyway, when you were describing it, sounded like his kind of philosophy on that. He kind of describes it in his
Okay.
book, The Moral Landscapes, where, it's funny because are you a Jordan Peterson or? I know he's
Act,
yeah, American centric, but I
yeah,
know he's more global too. So yeah, I am a big fan of
yeah.
his
Actually,
stuff, and
I've seen a lot of his talks and
he's a big
read
Nietzsche
some
guy.
of.
Yeah, he's a big Nietzsche guy
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah,
that. So it was interesting when you were talking, you were describing the first axiom of yours, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like the Peterson kind of the life is
yeah,
suffering. So
yeah,
what do we
yeah.
do about it? And then I was the second one sounded like the Sam Harris one where he was saying, the goal what is with his book The Moral Landscapes, and he argues a couple of different things, but the kind of underpinning is what is the goal of science and philosophy and technological advancement. It's mainly to increase human well-being and flourish. Like that's what we say the goal is of medicine, tech, all of these things that we're trying to do. So how should we go about that kind of thing? So it's just interesting with that, and they've done a few podcasts together where they clash a lot about how they so it's interesting that. And plus, I have all these
Sure.
questions about philosophy for you because it's I just did an episode with a friend on speaking of German, Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain. So
Hmm. Oh, yeah, I saw
so
that.
much
Yes.
philosophy in that, so much
Oh, yeah,
philosophy in
yeah,
that, and it was just so interesting. So it's been on my mind. So when I was looking up and preparing for this, and I saw it's a hobby of yours, it's something that you have always been interested in intellectually, and then in your writing and all of that too. I was like, oh, we're definitely talking about this with a
yeah,
yeah. So I was interested, and you said yeah. So you're big and then I was just listening to a Peterson podcast where he had Peter Thiel on, the American tech
yeah,
billionaire,
yeah,
and they were kind of clashing because Peterson was coming from kind of the Nietzsche perspective, and Thiel is really steeped in the kind of Rene Girard kind of philosophy from the kind of 70s and 80s, and kind of pushing back against the Nietzsche kind of and it was just so interesting. It's just been on
yeah,
my
yeah,
mind. It's just been on my mind. So if we're going to talk about this as we go along here, yeah, it's
yeah. This is
and,
this is very fascinating.
yeah, yeah. And I wanted to ask you again because I have, Magic Mountain on the mind. I've been thinking about philosophy and fiction, but also as entertainment, and then also as a device for drama creation, kind of like in the Magic Mountain or in your own books. And I wanted to ask you, your thoughts on this kind of philosophy as drama creation, philosophy as entertainment, philosophy in fiction. What are your thoughts on that? And again, I know that's a huge, huge question.
Yeah,
Please,
yeah,
yeah,
but
just your thoughts. Yeah, we don't need to solve it for the
yeah, but
world, right? Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. But actually, that is very close to my heart. Also, this the philosophical and overlapping into the spiritual. For me, those things
Oh
are
yeah, I want to get
intertwined.
there too. I want to get there with you too. Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
but I actually consider it my mission to share some of these insights, and not that they're not very original, as I always point out that what I say it has been said by philosophers and spiritual people all through history. But I think that sometimes somebody also said that you have to teach what you want to learn and in order to understand it. And for me, this is also a process of understanding. But these especially, yeah, there's many of the German philosophers and authors. They're really inspiring and interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking like kind of using it in craft, like using it to heighten attention in a scene. Like I'm just thinking like the Magic Mountain scenes where like there's a lot of scenes where these intellectuals are just kind of debating back and forth, that kind of pestering each other with questions and poking holes in the theories, and they're kind of adjusting and thinking, and I'm thinking, and they don't even come up with a definitive answer by the end of the story,
Oh,
so it's like but I was so thrilled reading it, and I talked about it on that episode, but I've just been thinking about it since, where I'm just like, how do you think that works, or how do you use it in your own fiction in terms of using the philosophical kind of themes, ideas to either pepper it in with characters or have characters straight, clash, or I mean, I don't know, I've been using it as like a drama tech, like a kind of a craft technique too,
Mm,
beyond
mm.
just the obviously the ideas are fun and great and stuff too, but then yeah, I don't know, how do you feel about that, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, I'm very what you call conscious about my tools and craft and so on. It's and I also very conscious that it's very limited. I use the platform of writing fiction is for me. My motivation is not the entertainment part, it's the communication part. It's I hope that somewhere there's a reader that will find it useful, some of the themes and the things that I point out. So to me, the story and the plot and the suspense, hopefully the entertainment part, for me is actually not the goal. And that's probably why yeah why I yeah I, it's my goal is to share some of my ideas and my thoughts, and my fiction is a platform, a carrier, you could say, for spreading those thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always, and I like that. And I like the tradition of how literature has kind of always been that, even going, yeah, okay, modern kind of Western European American kind of world. We can kind of trace it back to the Greeks, where that all kind of started, at least in terms of like the systems, the way education works, the way we would write and read books and stuff. But there is that level of, we've always used this as a vehicle for those ideas, for those, even having fictional characters argue back and forth like man does. Go listen to that episode, listeners. But then also, like, I think, like you said, just kind of like personal, and I remember like when I was growing up, and I'm a millennial, so I'm like, I'm 35, grew up in like suburban America and all of that. And there were these kind of, kind of like, how could I put this, kind of like really masculine, kind of like, bad boy writers in the 90s. I'm thinking like Bret Easton Ellis, I'm thinking like Chuck Palahniuk and
Mm,
Fight Club
yeah.
and stuff like that. And I remember like when me and my buddies and stuff were discovering these books, these stories, there was they weren't explicit they weren't explicitly philosophical, but they were we my friends and I, we wanted to emulate what the kind of philosophy of the characters, like a Tyler Durden's kind of nihilistic, almost Nietzsche level kind of
Mm, yeah.
character. And they didn't say that explicitly, but you kind of pulled that out, and you really liked that aspect of the character and related to it, and you kind of, yeah. So I don't know, I was thinking about that along those lines, and just kind of how we almost imitate what we see in fiction. And I guess that's changed to, and of course that we always do, and stuff like that, but I mean, that's kind of changed from fiction to TV and movies now, and
Oh
like
yeah. Oh
memes on
yeah.
the internet and scrolling
Yeah.
social media now is influencing people in that exact same way that literature used to. um but yeah, I don't know, that's just so fascinating to me, how that
Yeah,
works.
I
And
think
please, yeah, please.
yeah, I think it's sad that a lot of these new fast media
Yeah.
that in a way have replaced the literature and reading for every parts of society, because the silence and the um, reflection and everything that you get from reading, you don't get it in the same. It's very light. It's not very nourishing. And I always say to friends and family, I say reading fiction is probably one of the best cognitive investments you can make in your life, because you force yourself and your mind in a situation of peace and abstraction from other inputs, and then you have to build this universe with these characters and these persons, and to make it to make them come to life as the author wanted, or in some on other rendering of what the author wanted. And that just a thing like empathy, I think we are missing out on a lot if you don't, if you only have the easy stories like
Right.
movies, and movies can be great,
Right.
but it will never be the same as reading. People always say if they watch a movie based on a book they've read, they always say, "Yeah, I like the book better," and that should. Even though the movie, as a movie, could be an ingenious work of art, and often is,
Right.
it doesn't it doesn't give the same uh, reflective or meditative distance to your own existence, and they're not useful in the same way. They are. So I think that's sad actually, and it's actually absolutely true as you say that when that in the times of Charles Dickens and in the in that time, fiction was the highest form of entertainment,
Right.
and they waited every week for these new publications where to continue reading about the stories about Oliver Twist and everyone. So that's before cinema, and that's before radio and
Right.
computers, obviously, and I think this may this may be a bit preju- prejudice, but I think that maybe the common man and woman at the time in the mid 19th century, I mean 150 years ago, they were probably more. I think I don't know if it's true or not, but I have this idea that they were probably more literate that the average person is today, because we don't read as much any longer. We don't read newspapers or um, serialized fiction and so as they did in those days. So
Yeah.
that's sad. I hope it will get a renaissance at some point where when people find out that there's a mental health dimension
Yeah.
to reading as well, and not it's not just a short a slow entertainment. It is productive and relevant in so many ways.
Yeah. And I love the distinction you make in terms of like what you're left with versus from a movie versus a book. What you pull out of that, it doesn't yeah. And I mean, who knows why we could speculate, maybe it's because it's a more interactive kind of, movies are such a passive medium. You just sit there and watch, whereas books, you have to physically read the book, read the words, turn the pages, like feel these things from just reading a book instead of being stimulated by a visual type thing. You kind of have to work the imagination a little
Exactly.
bit more. Yeah. And I like that you equate it to health, mental health. And we've had other guests on the podcast do this. And a friend of mine, they have a podcast, shout out to Rare Candy. Those guys, they do the same thing where they do kind of like a men's health and kind of entertainment podcast, and they talk about how reading is part of mental health and part of your
Oh,
overall
yeah,
health, and like, you need to make an effort to do it, just like you need to make an effort to sleep or exercise or diet or whatever else. It's the same thing. But
exactly.
when you were talking about it, and before we move off philosophy, I mean, we're going to keep bringing it up, but just um I was thinking as you were saying this, and I was like, is science fiction, and I didn't prepare this question, but I'm thinking about it now, is science fiction kind of a Nietzschean genre? Not always, but I was thinking of Vonnegut or something as particular. It's kind of the life is suffering, the most basic kind of interpretation, we'll say. Life is suffering, this kind of, I'm thinking of Vonnegut stuff. I'm thinking of even, Rick and Morty, the kind of, science fiction cartoon, very Nietzschean. Life is suffering,
Oh yeah,
very, nothing is, yeah. So I don't know. You think sci-fi kind of lends itself to that kind of
I think
interpretation,
that
or yeah?
I think there may be a point there, because I mean the whole idea of creating an alternative universe, or an altered world, a utopia, a dystopia. it must come from some sort of discontent with the current world. How could we make
Right.
something that is better? And then and that may very well come from some sort of suffering or perceived suffering. It doesn't have to be personal, but everyone can see, as I always say, that even if you are all what do you call it, if you are uh, washed up in your own hedonism, you can't look away from the fact that other people are suffering. And in my philosophy, that with the meaning of existence, other people's suffering is as bad as your own. It may not be as painful, but it is a problem that you, as a rational thinking person, should try to solve. Say, like just like if you burn yourself, you'll try to fix the problem and get some balm on cold water, and you'll try to solve them. But why do you only try to solve your own problems? What is the difference between? It's very subjective. So it's very interesting that this the traditional science fiction, maybe even in into the genres like space opera and theme genres like that it comes from, that it originates in a wish to say, how could we make a better world? How could we make remove suffering? So that's very interesting. That there's a philosophical, even pinpointed with the darker theories like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, and that there's a link. There's a link there. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we're fascinated by that on this podcast. Yeah, absolutely. And then the link between the fiction and the mind, because even if it's fictional, you're creating this stuff. I always talk about mythology and kind of why has that survived is because we know it's not real. We know it didn't happen, right? And I even think like American mythology specifically, we have a story over here where it's kind of like George Washington chopped down the cherry tree kind of thing. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
it didn't happen. It's not real, right? But it's like, but it's a myth. It's a myth making thing that kind of glues humanity together. It kind of bonds us into this. Yeah, let's be honest about what we do. Kind of like an ethos and like this philosophy within this myth that like you don't even think you're not even processing it really in your brain consciously, but then you are processing it in this kind of unconscious way, and then the myths build this through. I mean, David Foster Wallace argued something like this with cliches, before I think what was that, like 2002-ish, 2006-ish or something, that he said, these cliches, why are things cliche? Well, because they're little bits of truth that have been passed down for centuries. Don't count your
Mm.
chickens before they hatch. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. These kind of little life advice things that were true, have always been true, so true that they wind up being cliches that you pass down, and so you want to avoid them as a writer, but still they're there. You have to deal with them still as a writer. And it's kind of interesting how that works. And I think this is a good place to move into the spirituality side of things too, with your work and then your personal philosophy and all that. I wanted to ask you about your spirituality. What would you
Please.
say your spirituality is? And how do you use it in fiction? And again, I'm thinking of the Magic Mountain, and I'm thinking of, yeah, how does it come across in your fiction, your everyday life? Like, well, yeah, what would you say your spirituality is? You said you were raised religious, and I'm not familiar with that specific. Is that kind of like a sect of Christianity, kind of like the Church of England in
It,
Denmark?
yeah, it is very comparable to Church of England. Um, it's Lutheran Reformed
Okay, right. Yeah, you said that. Sorry. Yeah,
evangelism.
right.
Yeah, so like a bit like yeah, the rest of Scandinavia and Finland and Church of England, obviously a, a break with the traditional Catholic church and traditions. And we have it also a lot here in Switzerland. Of course, they are both they are traditional Catholic, and then centered around some cantons. They have a lot of Reformed Christians as well. So I had, of course, my father being a priest. We had, they never, even though we talked a lot about the Bible, and it was important for both my parents that we knew the stories, and especially about Jesus, of course. They never he never actually preached in that way that he tried to convince us. He made a point of saying you will find out, you will find these things out on your own by yourself when the time is right. But they wanted to give us some tools that we could and as a part of my, the youth rebellious period, I flirted a lot with the atheistic. I think a lot of young people do that because it's such an
Yes, and
easy explanation, atheism, and he didn't. My father didn't mind. He said, "Yeah, when you're in your 30s, you will be as religious as I am. That's I'm not." He didn't. He wasn't afraid of that. He saw it coming, and. And he was absolutely right. But I think that to- what yeah, I think it's studying all kinds of philosophy and all kinds of religions and traditions from all over the world has converged my thinking into this the transcendent model that I have now, which I think is very. That's my whole message. The core of my message is explaining this, the model, the idea of the world, the cosmos being a projection, and also trying to explain it on a quantum level, where where the probabilities, how they somehow turn over into this new medium,
right,
where and how the dimensions and time they evolve from the creation in real time. But then there's nothing. Then I mean, all the natural laws and the physics, they are immanent. They're not. They're created in this hierarchy. So this is very fundamental to me. The idea that the world, the cosmos, is a projection. It's not an illusion. It's a projection. There's some sort of technology making this projection with some other natural laws and rules, and understanding that, and always having this, instead of the spiritual part being some philosophical contemplation in a relaxed period of your life in good company, and saying when everything else is in order in your life, health and family and work and economy, everything, then at some point you find the peace and the resources to start thinking about the spiritual elements. And that is important for me to turn that upside down and saying this is the spiritual should be the starting point. The understanding, or I call it the awareness also of what it is that is observing your action and yourself and your mind and your decisions and the physical cosmos. This awareness should be the starting point of everything that you do and consider. This way to turn it upside down has been very important to me, and that is also what I hope to contribute to other people, saying that the spiritual element, that's not like a luxurious endpoint of existence. That's the starting point. You should view everything through those glasses, saying that this is a base, this is a starting point.
yeah, absolutely. That's very interesting. Very interesting in terms of, and the reason I asked this one, because it's in your work, but two, it's something that is a theme on the podcast. I've been fascinated by this idea of faith, spirituality, and people have mean all different things by that too. So it's always like, oh, what are you talking about? But it's like, I don't know, because I was the same thing. I got very, and I call myself atheist. I was enamored by the new atheist movement that was kind of just ended when I was like at that age in high school, going into college, where you read that kind of stuff and you're like, oh wow, like, and you're really enamored by it. And then I'm thinking now, when you kind of, like you said, I like that you said it's an easy answer to this. I think it is. It's an easy little neat, all wrapped up little answer for everybody to be like, oh, well, the answer is it's not real. But it's so much deeper than that. It's so much
Yeah,
harder
yeah,
to articulate than that. And I think of something like Ayaan Hirsi Ali right now, the stuff she's doing about it, where she's kind of renounced the atheism stuff that she did previously, and she's arguing for it from a very different kind of intellectual standpoint, where she's not trying to argue that, oh, this is definitively true and we can prove it. She's saying, I choose to believe it. And I choose to believe it because it makes me happier. It makes me more content, because my entire culture and civilization is wrapped up in this thing that is baked into the cake. You want a slice of cake? Well, you're getting a slice of this too, with it. Like, it's
yeah,
no,
yeah.
no getting it out of there. It's all contaminated in there. And are we wasting our time to try and get it out, or something? And really, what is the benefit of trying to get it out? It's not all that clear that we had a benefit in mind when we were making all these arguments during the new atheist kind of explosion in the early 2000s, and then all of that with those figures. I'm a big Chris Hitchens guy. He's very influential on me. Christopher Hitchens and his kind of,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
God isn't great, and all of his stuff is, very entertaining. He's an entertaining guy. But yeah, that's very interesting. Go into a little bit of what you mean by projection versus illusion, in terms of, because I think when people hear that, when people listening to this hear when you say, "Oh, it's a projection," right? They think they're gonna take the literal. They're gonna take the very literal kind of interpretation of that, right? We're
So
just like,
they
"Oh, you're
should.
saying." Oh, yeah, yeah. Go into it, please. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I have no doubt that as you start to investigate the boundaries, of creation, what happens in the early milliseconds after the Big Bang, what happens at the lowest quantum sub particle levels, and if you could explain that with the tools and the sciences that we have, then all would be good. But if the laws of physics and the dimensions, if they are immanent properties of some sort of functionality on a transcendent level, then it doesn't make sense to try to prove what's behind the universe with the tools that are created on a higher what do you call it, level of abstraction, like the Higgs boson, the quantum particle that actually gives matter it's like what do you call it, the slowness, or the idea of physicality. I think that's a good example of something that is immanent, that the um, we 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 can't prove things that are under the natural laws if the quantum particles, they they don't follow the natural laws, they create the natural laws.
Right.
That's an important insight for me. So how do they create the natural laws? And you aspire to explain.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
How they create the natural laws using the natural laws that they create. That's illogic. You
Right.
can't do that. And then my point is that we don't know. Maybe we will never know what is the technology on this level. But there has to be some sort of platform. And maybe it's like a giant simulation. I think Elon Musk believes it's a lot of people do
Right.
that this is a simulation because the odds of that this is the base reality is so low. So statistically, this has to be a simulation. But I think you have to also use, Occam's razor and say, I don't believe in parallel universes, but what's the need for them to explain? Just saying that there's one cosmos. It originates from a transcendent energy in a lack of better descriptions. This is all metaphorical, of course, but I see this transcendent energy as like a hierarchy and emanating from God, in a lack of better words.
Right.
And on the lowest level of this hierarchy is the level where the dimensions and the time is created. And that's why I call it a projection instead of an illusion, because an illusion, you can't prove it. It could be a hallucination in your mind. But a projection is shared. You and I see the same, although that can, of course, be discussed anytime. That's part of the philosophy also. But we have this, we live in a shared reality.
Right.
And most of us can agree that, yeah, that cup is red, that car is blue, and we can't be sure what other people attribute to the color blue and so on. That's also a fundamental discussion, but we can agree on what we see, and we have a language that we share to describe what we see. But our language is so high in creation and in culture that as a tool it will probably never be sufficient to explain
Right.
the technology behind the projection.
And
But
part,
for me, it has been it has been a simplification of a lot of understandings about the universe.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. And especially something like language too. Again, being writers, this is the tools we're writing around and the pool we're swimming in, because it was created after the fact. So what you're talking about is before the language before language even exists, there's the quantum particles, there's this move, yeah. So that is interesting. How could it ever explain it through language if it's this man-made
Yeah,
there? Even
yeah,
philosophy, how could we even, this man-made kind
we
of.
can't.
Yeah, I remember Hitchens during a famous debate, I think with a rabbi or something. He got not stumped, but the rabbi was kind of accusing him of, he's like, you keep using logic. He said that's a man-made thing. Like, and Hitchens had
Yeah,
to
yeah,
admit that, yeah, it is man-made. It is a man-made thing that I'm relying on to
exactly.
yeah, like, and then he's like, but I'm talking about something before the man-made stuff. And it's like, well, how can we know? And then it keeps going, the debate goes on, but it's still yeah, very interesting, very interesting.
And that's very true. That I don't remember who coined the term or who said it first, but it's very spot on. Someone who said, yeah, even the most hardcore scientists, you always need at least one miracle for your platform to exist and for your laws. And you know about Rees, the astronomer royal from England. What Martin Rees, I think he was called.
Oh, I have
He
heard of
wrote
him.
a
Yeah, yeah.
He wrote an excellent book called Just Six Numbers, where he goes through some of the fundamental constants of the universe, the relationship between sometimes the number of dimensions, the relations between gravity and other forces, and say that they have some arbitrary values. If those values were just 1% of a percent off, the universe after the Big Bang would not have expanded, or it would have expanded too quickly, and the stars would not start the process of fusion to create all the other elements. And so that's also what that has been my experience as well, that a scientific understanding of the universe to one point, it is a barrier to a spiritual understanding. But then, if when you cross that barrier, you understand that the scientific understanding and the scientific search and hope for understanding is actually is even more proof of the truth behind the cosmos that you are searching for. It shouldn't stand in your way. And in that way, I think maybe it can be compared to some of the dogmatic religions where tradition and scripture and dogmas, they are, in my view, an excellent way to get you started on an acceptance of a transcendent power or a God, but communicated in terms of language and tradition that you share with the culture you are part of. But maybe for people that are not part of that culture, all these the dogmas and the traditions and the liturgy, they it looks strange and can be a hindrance. They stand in the way of your understanding. They're not helpful if you're not part of that tradition. Then they are a hindrance of you getting this insight that I feel is very fundamental. So if you're not part of a tradition, you shouldn't, especially as an adult, I don't think you should try to use study scriptures. You should do it for so many other reasons, but you shouldn't do it as a way to understand, to transcend the idea of the universe as a projection and leave the atheistic foundation behind. And you shouldn't be caught up in the study, because what is important for me is actually, and it would also be very unfair and undemocratic in a way, that if the transcendent insight was only if it was only available to literate and studied and people who have been sitting with books for 50 years. I think that the universe can be, and as a projection, and probably as some sort of meaning behind it, it can be understood by a 5-year-old child in any part of the world. And that goes back to what I said about it being a starting point instead of an end point of studies. You should start by saying, why is there anything at all? Okay, somebody said it emanates from another dimension or another hierarchy of energies. Okay, and in my tradition we call it this and this and this, and here we call it this. But you should be able to understand it on a logical and a rational level as a starting point, and because then all the answers, all the simplifications that follows this realization, they will be easier to understand, and you will recognize the search in the scriptures and in the traditions maybe from my point of view, especially in the esoteric parts of any tradition, but you will recognize the simple truth. It will just be more elaborate and more detailed, maybe still on a metaphorical platform, metaphorical language. But I mean, I've been very inspired by Kabbalah, for example, even though it's probably not something that I will never understand. But seeing these models for how the transcendent system produces the world and the dynamics in the world that are similar, according to that tradition, are similar to what happens on the transcendent side. That has been very. I can watch that for hours and hours and say, yeah, okay, this makes sense. But it the simple. That's what I hope to convey, is the simple understanding that if it makes sense to someone that the cosmos is a projection, that is an enormous step in understanding everything around you,
Yeah.
potentially.
There's, when you're saying all this is making me think of, some of the arguments that I've heard from figures that I admire, that we've talked about already. All these different public intellectuals that talk about these things for a living. It's there's always again, I'm bringing up Sam Harris. He has this argument where there are a lot of underlying assumptions when he uses the term philosophical bedrock. So like when you're breaking down philosophical principles or something, you eventually reach a point that he calls philosophical bedrock, where you can't really drill through or drill down any further. And he says you kind of have to bootstrap. You have to make an assumption. You have to pull those straps on your boots and stand up and say, okay, this is what, an atom is, or this is what, a novel is. You have to kind of pull those bootstraps, and that involves making a baseline assumption. And like you're saying, this kind of shared projection almost is that maybe that baseline assumption, right? It's interesting to think about in terms of that. Like he says something about medical ethics or whatever. You can debate the medical ethics and go break it down, break it down. He's like, and eventually you just have to pull those bootstraps and say, okay, well, we're trying to help people. Like that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah,
And I think that there is a reluctance from maybe the more atheistic mindset to go into what's beneath that bedrock, which is the philosophical assumption, or what you would call, am I understanding that right? Like a kind of a shared projection of, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah, okay, good, good,
exactly.
good. Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, it's very fascinating. There is this kind of, and the argument would be that an atheistic worldview is ignoring those baseline assumptions in order to get to the next level without doing the work, which goes back to what you said.
yeah.
It's easy, right? It's easier to do that than it is to go into these baseline assumptions. Is like, where do they come from? Uh, what's driving those? Why do we all share this kind of intuition about it, like without having meeting or read anything about it, or anything like that? It's very, very fascinating
That's
stuff.
true. Yeah,
Very
yeah.
ripe for fiction, very ripe to
Oh,
explore
yeah,
fiction in
yeah.
that. Yeah, like if you have that as your baseline, well, now we can go all different types of directions, especially in the
But
sci-fi genre. No, please,
oh,
please.
yeah, yeah. I think it's absolutely true what you say, that atheists, they take the easy solution, because they only have to prove things that already exists, and in logical and in physics, and not asking, not having, or what do you call it? They allow themselves not to ask the questions of what created all this. They think that this is base. This has always been like that,
Right.
and that's why I say to also I've worked with atheistic people as well, and I always say that I think it's unrealistic if you hope that natural science, theoretical physics, for example, will one day prove itself, prove the
The string theory
logic.
guys and
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And that's why I think what you call the bedrock is an excellent term, and I call it a leap of faith,
right.
that you have to decide in one point of your life, do you want to live in this closed universe where like in a room where you have most of the explanation of why things in the room look like they do, or do you want, this is more, like Platonism, do you want to understand what created the room and the things in it? Because uh, identifying objects and their attributes and properties and their relations and their measurements and so on, that's all very well. That's super. That's interesting, because we want to know more about what the world we live in.
Yeah,
But expecting that the answers, that this search will answer all the questions of what's behind it, that's what leads me to saying that that's unrealistic. At one point, everyone has to make this leap of faith, and I usually use the image of saying, yeah, you have a pointer pointing this way and pointer pointing this way. You don't know anything about the coordinate they are pointing at, but you can see every point is pointing in this direction. Everybody who has thought about these things points in this direction. Maybe, yeah, maybe you should take that leap of faith and accept that there has to be something behind it, and understanding it as a protection, still being a metaphor, but that there's a medium that creates this universe that we're in, the dimension and time and everything. Um,
that's
I feel from a scientific point of view, even from an atheistic point of view, is a really safe step to take, because you're not forced into a tradition saying, yeah, there are these entities, and you have to do this, and you have to write. You have to read this, and you have to behave like this and follow these laws. And if you don't do that, you'll be doomed or whatever. All these different traditions who have they have the explanations that are created in another epoch and tradition and culture. And I think you could just boil it all down saying that, is there something behind the cosmos? And then if you take that leap of faith and conclude that there probably is, it's also from a scientific point of view, it's probably the most, it's Occam's razor. It's the most simple answer. When you have done that, all the other stuff falls into place, all the explanations, and you understand, you find that you have the tools to understand a lot of things about the sciences and about but you can follow up and do exactly what you want to do with that knowledge. But I think it's a good starting point. And as I say, that I try to have this awareness as a platform for my whole understanding and observing the things I observe through my senses and my thoughts and my memories. Always have this base understanding a point of, yeah, as a starting point.
yeah. And this gets, I think you're describing that kind of what Ayan Hirsi Ali is doing now, where she is making this thing where it's actually, at least to the new atheist crowd where she was a part of, she's saying that actually these are baseline assumptions and we're taking them for granted and we're not going into where they come from or why they were already there when we started this kind of uh and that's where that kind of that line, I choose to believe it. I choose, it is a choice that I've
Yeah,
made because I think there's something here that is explanatory in a certain way Yeah, yeah, the very, very fascinating where we are with that too. It's crazy that it took so many years for that those arguments to be made, but very interesting how that's playing out now. Uh,
It,
uh,
it is. It is.
yeah, with these kind of you're assuming like oh, we're trying to do good in the world. Okay, where does your idea of good come from? Like where does that come from? Like, well, if you go out far enough and we hit that bedrock and then go beneath the bedrock, well, it kind of comes from this long amalgamation of different kind of leaps of faiths that were taken over all these years, that centuries leading to this and then forming this religion and then that happening and then all, here we go around and around. Yeah, it's very fascinating. Very fascinating to hear all this. Very fascinating. Um, Getting to your book eventually here. Finally getting to your book
Yeah,
here. Yes, yes. Um, uh, why did you choose to go the self-publishing route? I was thinking, we asked this question of a lot of writers that come on here because we're fascinated. There's so many options to writers now. Why go that route with a science fiction thriller series? Like you would think, at least over here in the US, that's like the only thing the market wants right now is like science fiction and romance and stuff. Why did you choose to go the self-publishing route?
um, yeah. I tried the traditional way and
Yeah,
talked to a handful of publishers, traditional publishers, and no one was interested. At
right.
the time, I had the concept and the idea for the karma sequence, and I don't know why, but I think maybe perhaps it was too yeah, too weird or something. And I didn't spend years and years trying to pursue this. After the feedback from a couple of publishers, I think okay, having this option of self-publishing, I figured okay, that looks like an easy way to do it. And my ambition was mainly to get my books out there and to get it in the hands of some readers. And I thought that maybe if I had a budget for some advertising, then I could create like an interest. So that was my motivation for going that route.
Yeah. How did the advertising work out? We're fascinated by that kind of stuff because there's so many options. We've had a lot of writers that have gone this route. And I hear mixed things. I hear, you could spend hundreds of dollars a day and not get any clicks. You could spend, if you're smart about it, you could spend $100 and get a bunch of clicks and sales and stuff like that. So I don't know. How did that go for you? How did the kind of marketing yourself and paying for that go? And listeners want to know this kind
Uh,
of stuff because this is the nitty gritty of
of
writing
course,
novels nowadays. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. This is, I mean, you have to be very conscious about these questions. And I really don't have any good experience with advertising. I've only advertised. I don't know if I'm probably not good enough to making search terms and stuff. But what I found was helpful for me. I tried Amazon advertising, and I didn't really sell any books
Right.
through those channels. And
Yeah, we've heard
but then
mixed
I've
things about that on this podcast. We've heard
yeah,
some mixed
yeah,
things. Sometimes you get success. Some that has to do with reviews, how many reviews you have, and
yeah,
Amazon's going to
yeah,
pump that thing. Yeah, yeah, it's very, very vague, very opaque to
yeah.
most. If you're doing it, you have to kind of figure this out.
Reviews
Yeah,
are reviews are important. So and exactly in order to get some good reviews, I used I think some excellent services. For example, written word media. Do you know
no, but I've heard of other
platform?
ones I forget the name. It's some dumb name over here in the U.S. like Bookie or Blurby or so, I don't know, something like that where you could service. How did that work? How did that work out for you? I'm curious.
I think that worked very well. I
Good,
think
good,
written
good.
word.
Yeah,
Maybe what you're thinking about is free Booksy. I think is one of the
something like
services
that.
from.
Pubby. It's something like that, or like Pubby.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. I don't know what that is, but
Same thing. Is this the same thing? It's like a service that
yeah,
does this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they have a newsletter they send to subscribers in different categories in different genres, and then you get your book gets exposed to those in the target group, and typically you combine it with a campaign on Amazon where your book is free and or very reduced price. And I actually had some good experiences with that, with a lot of downloads. And I think all the reviews I have a handful or dozen at the moment. That's not very much, but I think they all came from these campaigns from newsletter advertising or campaigning like that. And I also made a giveaway on Goodreads, which I think was very successful. A lot of people downloaded the books, and I got some feedback. And so I think that's probably those channels is something that I will explore more
Right.
in the future. And but advertising on Amazon and Facebook and Instagram, I don't, I haven't had any sales come out of that,
Right.
unfortunately. But
I've heard some interesting things. The Freakonomics guys, they have like a podcast. They do, you know, kind of like heterodox kind of evaluations of economic stuff and economic theories and stuff. And they did this great podcast episode about online advertising, where they just said it is estimated that I think something like 70% of online ads are seen by nobody. Like nobody sees them.
mm,
So all these companies, including the biggest in the world that are advertising via Meta or yeah, Google Ads or something like that, they can't even guarantee that people will see that. You know, like there's kind of like they can't guarantee that it's not just bots. They can't guarantee, you know, so you're paying all this money and what are you getting on the returns, you know? But then there's a trap of it where all advertising now, it's not TV, it's not radio, it runs through social media. So if you're not
yeah, yeah,
advertising through social media, you're really not advertising, you know, unless you're paying the money for like a Super Bowl ad or something out here in America, at least, you know, or a big
yeah,
game,
yeah,
World
yeah,
Cup, you know, whatever. We'll do the international style.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just fascinating how that works too. Because yeah, we like to know this on this kind of podcast because this is the nitty gritty of being a writer. You know, especially going independent and doing it yourself. This is what you have to be constantly thinking about, or at least, you know, if not constantly, at least considering when you're doing this kind of stuff. So yeah, fascinating. I'm glad that it's working
And
because
it takes a lot of time.
right. Yeah. Did you have like a plan like that in terms of timeline? Because we've had others that said, yeah, you know, I understand this is going to be like a 10-year thing. If I'm trying to fish for readers and I don't have the backing and the press and the marketing of, you know, $100,000 budget or something from like a big press to do that, you know, I don't know. How do you plan to go about that in terms of, yeah, do you have like a long-term view in terms of getting the readers like 5, 10 years, putting them out
I,
or
I, I actually I don't have specific strategies like that. For me, the milestone or the ambition for me was to write the books,
right.
and then I naively thought that maybe then all it took was to get a contact with in the publishing industry,
Right.
and then I could go back to writing, and they would take care of the marketing and the sales. And that's definitely not how it is.
Right.
So and then I've also worked with some marketing and they have been from a company called PR by the book, and they've done a great work. But it's still it involves me a lot. I have to also be involved in a lot of things and to make this work, and a lot of material and so on, which is fine. That's completely natural. But there is a lot of work where I think that I would prefer to be writing.
Right.
So it's kind of to talk Vonnegut again. It's a kind of catch-22
Yes.
that you have to decide if you want to write books or if you want to sell books. You can't
Right.
do both.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're describing it perfectly. I think a lot of listeners sympathize with that too, because that's the dynamic. And this is what a lot of artists, and we're special, we don't discriminate, we love all artists on this podcast, but we have a special place for writers. It's you bump up against, as an artist, as a creator, you're bumping up against a business, this kind of business, art as a business, corporate art, this kind of, they don't care about your little project, they care about how much money can be made. It's kind of, I don't know. And you have to kind of, and I think that people get frustrated. And I understand that too. I feel it. I feel the frustrations. I try to be honest about it with people that are, in the same boat as me and all that. Yeah, you feel those frustrations because it is this kind of, like I didn't go to business school. I went to art school, like I didn't learn how to advertise, set up this kind of stuff and plans and all that. But then nowadays, when you go into a meeting, let's say you even got lucky enough to get, you pitched agents and the agent's interested, you go to the meeting, well, they expect you to have a marketing plan that you came up with, that, your next plan for the next several books. And if you're not doing that, they're going to pass because one, everybody, there's a lot of people that want to do this and not everybody gets to, but then there's also just like, there's a practical side of this where like, yeah, they're not just interested in publishing, art projects, they're interested in making sales. So if you're a nobody, not a Stephen King that has a name that just sells books, or a Crichton, that has a name that's bigger than the title on every book, because people will just
Yeah,
buy it because
yeah.
of that. It's a slog until you get there. If you get there at all, it's a slog. So it really is this kind of dynamic where you're like, how much time am I spending on this? And I do that with the podcast too. Is I have my own writing day job, my family, my child, and all that. And it's just kind of like, man, this is how much time do I want to dedicate to this? Is taking away from me having my hour to write or something, like how much is it worth it? Are you seeing the returns? And with something like creative work, it's pretty hard to gauge those returns. Of course you can point to sales, but like it's more than that. Like you were saying, it's about personal satisfaction, setting the goal and finishing it and all. I don't know. It just is a strange world out there for artists right now. And we always hear about the
Yeah,
success
yeah.
story, the top 1% who managed to, I don't know, do it through Patreon and like make a bunch of money, or Brandon Sanderson, the kind of the American kind of self-published sci-fi guy that made $50 million or whatever off a Kickstarter because he was, like, oh, I'll send you these copies. I don't know. I mean, there are 1%ers that can do that. But I mean, people forget about that too. It was like for a while there, Sanderson, nobody gave a shit. He was self-publishing his books and nobody cared. And then all of a sudden they did, and now he has this kind of reputation. But it's like he spent what, like a decade self-publishing obscure sci-fi novels,
Wow.
Like I mean, it's not like you just happened overnight, like this. He published and it was an instant success, That guy writes
No,
a
no,
lot.
no.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. He puts out a lot of books very quickly and all that kind of stuff. And built a fan base slowly over a long time. It just kind of, and he's uses social media, uses YouTube, uses these things, I mean, everybody that listens, they want an answer, they want like an easy, we'll do this, but it's so much more
yeah.
complicated. This is just like the philosophy side of thing. It's so much more
It
complicated than that.
is.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to say. There's no one way that fits all. There used to be that kind of traditional go through the big five, and that was your kind of best chance to get marketing and stuff like
Mm.
that. But that's changed now. It's completely shifted. So you can still go that route, but it's shifted a little bit because I have friends that have gone that route, published their books through these major, American
Okay.
big five. We call them the big five in America, where it's like the
Yeah,
five.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and they got no bucking, no money, no marketing budget, nothing. Like they got nothing from even
Mm.
going through those companies. And it's just kind of like, well, you're not even getting what they used to give you if you go through that. You
No.
still have to do it yourself. She was still making her own kind of tour, booking her own stuff, her own
Mm.
podcast appearances and bookstore appearances. She was doing all that herself. So it is kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's just a strange world we live in right now with in terms of artists and what you're trying to do, and going the independent route is there, but it's a hustle. Yeah, it's a tough thing, and I think people are afraid of it. I mean, I have my own fears of, yeah, you know uh it's a lot of work. It's a lot of,
It
you
is
got
a
to
lot
see
of
it
work.
through.
Yeah.
You got to see it through, and if you don't see
Yeah,
it through, it's
yeah.
never going to work. But if you do see it through, the chances, like it'll go up a little bit, but no guarantee for that either. And yeah, just so we love
Don't you
talking down on
think?
this podcast. Yeah, please do.
And it is interesting. But don't you think that sometimes there has to be an element of luck also,
Oh
that
yes.
if something goes viral, then you have really a success in your hand. and there can be many reasons for something going viral or of catching the interest of the
Right.
audience. It doesn't even. That's maybe what is so frustrating to us writers is that it there's no guarantee in neither quality or hard work
Right.
giving you that break. It could be anything, like if you write about some celebrity or some
Right.
crazy story, you could get a hit with something that is in all senses is terrible, but it has the interest of the audience, and then you go viral like that. The channels are it's they're hard to understand and monitor, especially as you say, if you don't have like a business degree and understanding of the marketing and and um, and that whole expertise. If you don't have that, and even if you do, I mean, a lot of people. That's why the competition is so hard. That that there's no guarantee that if you understand the market and the channels, and you find or produce a good product, that all these factors by themselves, they are not a guarantee that you will have a hit.
Right.
Some think
I
it's some sort of accidental luck, things like that
I like
are
to,
required.
yeah, and there's an example I always like to tell listeners, and of course, regular listeners know this, but the Stephen King, Carrie, his first big book was kind of a flop until the movie came out. The movie kind of made his
Hey,
entire
okay,
reputation. And he didn't even really make money off the book until the movie came out. And then they were selling the paperback
that's
rights,
interesting.
yeah, after that to
Yeah,
coincide with it. And that was his first big check. I think he got like 250K or something for selling the paperback rights. This was in the 70s, so that was a lot of money.
okay,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, so he was like, that was my first big like break. Whereas nobody knew, it was kind of obscure. He's a first time writer. Nobody knew, he didn't have his name, bigger than the title in all the books yet, or his whole section at Barnes and Noble to himself or something. You know, uh, it just wasn't there yet. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's just luck, right? Like, and then it kind of had a series of couple films after that, where it just be kind of snowballed. His first three books all became
Mm.
hit movies, and that kind of snowballed into him doing that. I mean, of course, he worked too. He has a great work ethic, a very
Oh yeah,
enviable work ethic. So he's always producing. So there's that too. He's putting in the work. But there's that luck. There's that little bit of why did J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter suddenly break out? Like it wasn't the first fantasy thing for kids or whatever. But some a little bit of luck has to be mixed in there too. A little bit of the unknown, a little bit of that leap of faith.
yeah,
That
yeah,
little bit of that
exactly.
has to be thrown in there. Yeah. So we love
And
hearing
and
that. Please, yeah, please go
and
on.
and you mustn't feel sad if you're not one of the lucky few, because you have still made something that hopefully. I usually say if one person, one of the themes in my book is addiction, and if and how to use, for example, the spiritual elements to break free of the addiction, and that's part of my motivation for writing is also that if someone can use this, if just one person can use this, it sounds maybe stupid to say, but that fits into with the idea of trying to make a difference in the world. If what you write helps one person, then perhaps it has been worth your effort and your hard work.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about addiction too, because we had a writer on who wrote this great memoir, and he was a former homeless drug addict on Skid Row in L.A. And has since gotten cleaner. Wrote this great memoir. We had him on, Jared Klickstein. Go listen to that episode, listeners. But and we were talking about it there, and he was saying stuff about how why is somebody more prone to addiction than others? Like what is the difference? And he was calling it kind of like a spiritual thing. It's like something spiritual within you that either drives you to use drugs and alcohol or whatever in that kind of abusive addiction way, or not. Like it's kind of like we keep trying to make it a science. We keep trying to be like, oh, it's a disease and the brain
Mm.
chemistry, and you're addicted to this little thing, and you're like, when it's true, there's of course that's true, but it's also like, but that doesn't quite explain, like the drive that you feel when you're addicted to stuff. It doesn't quite give the full explanation. So I don't know. I wanted to ask about your journey. Yeah, your journey from addiction, how that started. And I'm also really fascinated about, because so many people say, depending on what you're addicted to, how difficult it is, to get clean. And then this kind of that you only get clean when you want to get clean is what the people will say. And like, over here
Mm.
in America, kind of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, kind of these meetings and things that really help people do that. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting, kind of like you can lead a horse to water type thing, but you can't force them to take a drink.
Yeah.
Like, it is that another cliche that's true, right? Like you have to, I don't know. So I'm just curious about your journey. What led you to it, and what led you to get out of it? Well, was there an event? Was there like something you can point to? Was it a combination of things? I don't know. I'm just fascinated by how that works and the kind of motivation for it. How you find that inner strength and stuff to will yourself out of it, or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
However you want to approach that. Yeah, please.
Yeah, yeah, and that is also part of my mission to share the story and the tools that worked for me. Because I mean, we have a lot of, as humans, we have a lot of things in common. So hopefully, experiences of one person can help another person. And you mentioned AA, which I believe is a fantastic community and helps millions and millions of people all over the world. Um, this has been essential in my recovery as well, and that ties into the spiritual dimension as well. Also, that the belief in a higher power as a background and a motivation and a safety and a peace in life, saying that you're we don't live on a random obscure planet in a random part of the universe, and you're not just a random insignificant individual in a 6 or 8 or 10 billion other people. You have value, and not just for yourself, but as a whole. So the spiritual part of the healing, the recovery process, I think is essential. And I also write about it in my first book, that sometimes this aversion against the spiritual element, I have seen it a lot of times, sometimes it becomes a hindrance or a limitation for your recovery. If you are not willing to accept that there's probably something behind everything, probably a meaning. Also with my life, things I can do to make a difference. If you have this reluctance to accept this insight, then you have a worse time getting out of your addiction, because if you're in that state of mind where you say that, okay, everything is random, there's no intrinsic value to anything. I can make whatever I make of my life is what I make. I might as well enjoy myself. So you need this, as you called it, the bedrock. I think that's a terrific term. The bedrock that it doesn't move. You know that it's always there. You don't have to question it, and so. I think that the spiritual side, and then also and the understanding, what helped me escape my addiction was also the understanding that I think is central in AA as well, is that the alcohol or whatever drug you're on, it has this effect. It puts you in a mood,
Right.
and it's the mood that you're addicted to, not
Right.
the substance. And when you understand that there are special situations where you used to take a drink because you like the mood it placed you in. When you understand that is the purpose of you taking that substance, to get into that mood, and you understand that the mood is like a psychological thing. It's part of your mind, which that's part of my philosophy as well, is that the mind is part of the body.
Right.
It's the awareness and the observer that is distinct and separate from but the mind, with our memory and our feelings, all these hormonal stuff, and it's all the sensations, it's all from the body. And your memories, all when your body dies, all your memories and your feelings and your emotions and everything that is stored in your neurological system, that will of course die, like a hard disk in a computer that is destroyed. But the observing part, I believe, that's what I base my whole view on life and the transcendent on this. The observing part, everything that says mine and my about all these other things, my body, my mind, my memories, but if you take a step back and identify the observing element, that I think will return to. I use an image like the sun, that we all have like a beam of sunlight, and I also follow an Indian guru that says that ego is created in the moment of birth. We have this idea of subject versus object, that myself as separate from everything around me. And that stops the moment the body dies, the ego dies, and this ray of light returns to the sun or to God. And that understanding, but that ties into the mood thing also, that when you understand that your body is actually, you can, and that's where maybe the science element has its value also, because you can explain so many things in your body using science, chemistry and neurology, psychology, all these sciences. When you understand that they are all just mechanisms, they have their origins from something, maybe from that you understand that okay, you find out at a young age that this substance, in my case alcohol, it produces this mood in me, and I like that mood, and other people like that mood also. But I, maybe because of genetics, I had a harder time uh, putting the need for this mood behind me, and so you can find all these explanations, and they are helpful in you understanding yourself as a mechanism, because you are like everything is documented, and you can say, yeah, I know how memory works. I know how the hippocampus works for storing the memories of the day, and so all these things are valuable to understand, and not to be too mechanistic about yourself, but understanding yourself and your life as a biological process, as a platform of procedures that can be studied and understood. When you understand that, you can do something about it. So um, after I had the help, invaluable help to understand these mechanisms in myself, it was actually quite easy to put this abuse behind me, the addiction. And it's interesting that the physical part of the abuse of the addiction. There's a physical element, but that actually fades out in a very short time. It's the
Right.
mental
Right.
part of it, the longing for this mood that you place yourself in using these artificial substances. Getting rid of those cravings is more a mental thing, and you need some tools and probably some help to solve that. Some to at least some insights into that to that mechanisms. But the body has a fantastic way of healing itself in no times. In no time, you just have to understand the mechanisms in your psyche that pushes you back into this addictive state. And when you understand that, I mean, I've been sober for 12 years now this August, and I've never at one point thought, um, oh, it would be nice to have a drink or something. Like, I've identified many situations where I reflect and say, this was the kind of situation where I would have uh, gone to this substance to take off the roughness of the world and bring me in this desired state. I identify the moments, but I don't act on it because I don't need to. I know it's not who I am. I don't. So I tried many years to break free of the addiction using the hardcore method of pure willpower.
Right.
And it's just a question of time before you break,
Right.
because if you're thinking about it all the time, and you're trying to think about other stuff, but the mind, and in the first days the body as well, uh, the cravings and so on. If um, My personal experience is that if you're trying to do it the hardcore way on willpower, then you are bound to break at some point, and then you can start the cycle
Right.
all over again with the self-blame. And how do you treat the self-blame or escape from that? Yeah, well, there's a substance right here on the shelf that can help you. So understanding this mood element and the psychological mechanisms, I think, is helpful,
Yeah.
invaluable actually.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating too. Yeah, because I've just been thinking about it since that interview where I talked to Jared about that. I was thinking about it in a new way. Yeah, where we keep trying to medicalize it in this way. Like, oh, it's medicalized, medicalized, medicalized. You know, here's a drug for it. Here's treatment for it, kind of. But it's more than that. It's a little more complicated than just giving somebody Suboxone or something. Like a it is kind of we're not even thinking about it the right way, let alone studying it the right way. And so would they say, oh, there's a high failure rate for a lot of these programs and stuff. It's like, yeah, because maybe we're not thinking about it the right way in terms of how you overcome something like this, what even causes it, like what even and again, yeah, what separates the habitual kind of user from the recreational kind of, especially something like alcohol, right? Where most people can just, yeah, have a drink or something at a gathering or dinner, and that's fine, like the little buzz. But then there's some people that, you just can't. Like, I'm one of those people. It's a big appetite, like just kind of, can't get enough if something's good, like I can't get enough with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
food,
Me
yeah,
too.
drugs, yeah, alcohol, things like that, yeah. Books I consider, kind of like a drug in a way, kind of running, exercise, all of that kind of, but healthier, more constructive addictions, I guess, in that sense. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, just fascinating how that works. So I love hearing people's stories about all this. Ayo, the last couple questions we have here are just kind of all writing questions about craft, and then kind of like the nitty details of what it takes to, write a book and all that good stuff. But first, I wanted to ask you about your pen name. Why did you choose to write under a pen name, and how did it come about? What motivated it? Did you have a career or public facing job or anything? Yeah, why the pen name? Why?
Yeah. I was very conscious about this decision from an early point because I'm the type of person who really values my anonymity
Right.
and my privacy and being able to walk on the street without being recognized. And I think so. On a political level, you could even discuss if it's not a human right to be left alone, to be anonymous, especially in the eyes of power, and saying that you have the right not to be registered
Right.
anywhere. So I was very conscious about it, and I don't know. I didn't think of it was not because I expected to be a new Stephen King and anything or Michael Crichton or Dan
Hey,
Simmons.
even
But
King get a
but
pen name because he for different reasons, but even King wrote under a pen name for a
yeah,
while
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Even Crichton
So
wrote his first couple books under a pen name.
oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
true. So
yeah.
but I have no intention of stepping out of that anonymity zone because I'm in this forum, even here where you and I are talking, and we're talking in English, and we are talking about my books and so on. It is I have to be some sort of persona. I have to be. I now I'm A.O. Wagner, the guy who wrote these books, and I'm not the guy who goes for walks in the mountains in the weekend, and a lot of my own philosophies and thoughts, of course, go into the work and the writing. Where else should it come from? But I like to. I think you could also say that it's part of the branding that I don't want my person, my persona, my private me to be in this circus.
Right.
I'm not. This is yeah. This is part of my motivation for choosing to write under a pen name.
Yeah, I've heard other writers talk about something similar in terms of like Bret Easton Ellis. I'm a fan of his. I listen to his podcasts and stuff, and he said this, and he's got an unusual case where he got famous very young, before he graduated college with his first novel and stuff, and he said there were two people. There was the media version of who he was, and then there was like he who he actually was, right? So there was a media version based on interviews and even based on like the fictionalized things in his novels, like kind of like, oh, this is who you are, this kind of person. He said, but really it wasn't anything like that. And he said, and you can kind of choose to play into that. You could choose to reject it. You can kind of do these different ways, but when you put yourself out there, there's always going to be this kind of, like you said, a circus around kind of, they're going to create this kind of myth, this figure with your name attached that isn't actually you, but like, you're not going to say no, especially if it helps you sell books or something. Yeah. So that's interesting too. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, fascinating how that works. We would just like to know those types of things on this podcast. Yeah, what would motivate that? Because so many people do want the glory. They want the glory that comes with it.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
want
yeah.
their name immortalized in the canon or something. So it's always interesting. What?
And that's a fair
Right? Yeah,
motivation as well.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
some people that do it to make money, to become rich. That's also, I
Right,
mean, work. Work is work, and you have to pay your rent and your food
right,
and
right. Yeah,
everything. So if you want to, if everybody, that's, I mean, that's, I think there's nothing wrong with that ambition, fame or fortune. Those are good motivational factors as well.
yeah, yeah. That's. I like that you're honest about that too, because I think a lot of people like to kind of put a moral lens over that and be like, well, it's a moral for that motivation. So, well, is it? Like if you're just selling books, is it really all that immoral? I mean, like what are you talking about? You just yeah, like, oh, well, you don't want to admit that you're motivated by those things, and I'm like, people that say they aren't, I'm like, you're full of shit. Like, I was
Exactly.
listening to this
Yeah.
one interview. I was listening to a writer I like, I really admire, I love him, and he was saying, listen to an interview with him, and he was just like, oh, I didn't care. I didn't care if I ever got to do this for a living, He's like, and then I was listening to it, and he said, I applied to this residency 10 times before I got in. And I was just like, oh, you didn't care, but you applied 10 times? Like,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
you didn't care if you got to do this for a living, but you spent 10 years applying to the same thing to get you there.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
think you're kind of full of shit, dude. I think you're kind of not being honest about your motivation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah. even
something
even if it
wrong.
wasn't the total motivation, even if it was just a small portion of the motivation, like it was still there. It was still a little bit of it, not the total,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
yeah,
Please, yeah,
that's completely fair, I think.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
you shouldn't. I think it's the ambition. There's nothing wrong with the ambition. It's worse. I think it's
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
worse if you trick yourself into believing that you don't, as you say, somewhere have a little spark of that ambition as well.
Yeah.
I said to one of my nieces some time ago that I have this method of making sure that I will be disappointed in my ambitions, is that I aim solely for the sale levels of Stephen King, and everything below that will be a disappointment.
Right.
That way, I've made sure that I can only end up
Right.
disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people do that, dude. Like a lot of people, yeah. It's a very real thing that happens. Another thing we like to ask all writers on here: what is your writing routine like? How do you like to do it? Do you a daily writer? What is your routine like? How do you like to produce?
Yeah, I think a lot of people make this distinction between plotters and
Yeah.
pantsers, and I think that's a good model. And I'm so definitely a plotter myself. I usually say that I write a book the same way you build a pyramid. I mean, that is from the top and down. And I really do. I start with like a single word, like a theme. What do I want to convey? And then I split it up in maybe in three parts of the plot, and split those parts up in three sub parts, and so on. And that's why my first book is 27 chapters, and that's because it's 139. 3 times 9 is 27, so it's built like that. And then I found this fantastic tool actually called Plotter. I don't know if you've heard about it.
No.
No, like a software tool where you make a chart of your scenes and your elements in your scenes, the scenes in each chapter, and you can make colors for your themes and your plots and your persons, and that gave me an overview of yeah, okay, have I remembered everything? And then after I had those 27 chapters, I broke each of the chapters down in 10 to 12 scenes of what I wanted to happen for the plot to work. And then I made a rundown of each scene. So each chapter ends up with something like 80 to 120 lines, indented lines, of what should take place in that chapter. So if a chapter is for me typically like 3,600 words, I have actually written maybe 1,500 or 2,000 words in notes and a rundown of what I want to happen before I write a single word of prose.
Right.
And I also joke saying that when you need to um, um, handle a lot of text, you need the right program, and that's a spreadsheet. So
Right.
I have this in Excel. I have these indented columns of all my rundown items for each chapter, and then I have a specific column for the prose I want to write. And just like you fill out, painting by numbers, after I've finished the creative, the planning, the plotting phase, having this plot and the rundown, then I simply start one early morning in Excel, and then I look at the rundown points, saying what happens here, and then I fill out this cell, and it expands in height to reflect how many words I write about this. And sometimes I see, okay, I reorder my plot points and say this should come earlier. Then I reorder the rows in Excel. But then I write everything, and in a column left, and I've the width of the column is, and the size of the font makes it looks exactly like a printed book. So I have a feeling of how fast the progress is. And in another column, I have a word count, so I can, for each of these plot lines, I can see how many words have I written, and then it's easy to select those cells and see how much have I written today. And I have typically have an ambition of writing around 3,600 words per day, which is in my first book was a chapter. In the following books in the series, the chapters were a bit longer, so I have to write a chapter in 2 days. But then but that's after planning everything,
Right.
on this plot level, everything, what should set, what theme how should they cover this, and so it's actually my writing is the creative part. The creative phase has ended at that point. Now I'm just translating my ideas and my plot line by line to prose. And then uh, when that is done, I read that through, make edits, rearrange, of course, and everything. But it's two different modes I'm in when I plot everything out down in the smallest details, and when I convert that to the actual chapter. So that's my methodology for writing, and it's I think the method comes from my background as a computer programmer also, where you have the idea you have to do everything very top down, saying what does this function have to do, break it down in some sub parts, some sub functions, and at some point you write the actual code that executes the logic that you want to process the function. So it's the a hardcore definition of top down work that
Right.
how I structure my daily work.
I said it almost is like I've done some work in UX design and stuff like that in my life, and it's almost, yeah, like kind of the charts you have to do when you're presenting the plan. Yeah, very tech.
Exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I wanted to ask, do you usually compose in English, or do you do Danish, or what do you
No,
usually
I
write in?
I can only write in Danish. I had hoped now with the arrival of all these AI tools, Chat GPT and everything, that maybe if I had like a rundown so detailed as I always make them, that I could ask an AI to write the prose of the chapter. I tested it, and even today, with the improved quality of AIs over the last 3 or 4 years since they came about, it's the quality. I simply have to say, and that's not because I'm on a high literary level, but I simply can't use the
Right.
output that they write. It
Yeah.
can be. I have to write, and every word myself, and I can, and I have to write it in Danish because that is my native language. I
Yeah.
I have a much greater flexibility and vocabulary
Right.
and conditions for writing in Danish than I would have in English.
And I guess Danish is close. It's Germanic, right? From correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah. So
That's true.
there's at least makes it a little bit easier to translate into English if it's rooted in the same.
Much,
Yeah,
much
yeah,
easier.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So what I little I know about the languages and stuff like that, but yeah, that's
No, but
interesting. I
that's
had a
true.
I had a friend in grad school, and he was from Vietnam. And that's what he would say. He would say he wrote in English, but he said he almost viewed himself as a translator because he thinks in Vietnamese. He has to think for a minute before he speaks to you in English
Yeah,
or
yeah,
writes it
yeah.
down in English. And he was saying that, like, yeah, it's kind of strange, like I'm not quite thinking in English. I'm always thinking in Vietnamese and stuff, but then I put it out in English and it's almost like a translation process in his head when he's composing. So it's just interesting, yeah, how that works out. And then we get into the communication of languages and yeah, all that kind of stuff. And everybody likes to quote Borges or whatever when he's talking about the English language and why he chooses the English language in a lot of his stuff. And he was just talking, the English language. He had this great kind of quote where he just said it kind of cannibalizes other languages. Like it kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
it kind of we just take a French term or a Danish term
yeah,
or
yeah,
something
yeah,
and we
yeah,
just use it as it was meant to be used in that language. We don't even change it. We put accents over it, and now it's just, oh, that's an English word now, but it's not. It's French or it's Danish or
yeah, yeah.
it's
But
yeah. And then we just kind of cannibalize these other things and like put them in there where he just talks about like maybe it has to do with some of those languages being older than English. So they're like, there's only one word for rain or something or whatever it is, or I guess that depends region too. I'm a hobbyist in linguistics and they always say it depends on region. If you have 25 words for snow, it's because everybody lived in a place where there's a lot of snow all the
yeah,
time. But if you only have one word for this, but and then in English you can cannibalize it so they have 15 words to describe this or whatever because they brought it from all
yeah,
these other languages and it's a younger language that evolved out of the other languages and it kind of I don't know, just interesting stuff. So interesting how you choose to go about it. Yeah, I wanted to know as
and
somebody who's
inter
thinking in Danish all the time and then having to talk to me in English and all, and have your book in
yeah. I
English.
mean,
And
English is becoming second nature for most Danes because I mean we listen to English language pop music
right,
since back to the
movies
to
and yeah,
movies and actually a lot of phrases and idioms in Danish
right.
are slowly we are adapting English. You know,
People say
translations.
colonialism's over, but it ain't over, baby. Yeah,
No,
they
no,
said
yeah.
it, or it's cultural colonialism now. Like, yeah,
But it's funny with having as your friends the Vietnamese having this overhead of translation in
right,
real time that you I have it the same when I speak when I have to speak German as I of course have to do a lot here in Switzerland in this part of Switzerland and I do the same as your friend. I formulate everything in Danish, and then I try to do as fast a lookup as possible of each word and grammar, and translate it in real time to German. And that phase takes there's a price to pay. That takes a toll. I'm much more fluent in English, even though that's not even comparable to my Danish, obviously. But I couldn't have this conversation in German, for example,
Right.
even though, as you say, all three are Germanic languages.
Right.
I had a huge advantage. I mean, I've tried to learn French also, and I mean that's tough. I mean,
Yeah.
as a Dane or an English-speaking person, it's fairly easy to understand the grammar and a lot of the German. It's not. I mean, learning French,
Right.
that was really a challenge for me. In high school, I had to learn it, and a couple of years after I graduated, I had forgotten
Right.
everything. So
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I study some, nothing very rigorous, but I've been, a couple little bit a day. I'll study a few languages with stuff. French is one of them, and that's why the Romance languages in particular, it reverses the logic of what you're used to. If you grew up speaking a Germanic language, it kind of
yeah, yeah,
reverses
it's
the logic of how you craft the sentence, and then you're kind of so you have to kind of completely shift how you're thinking about it to get yeah.
exactly.
So it makes an extra step. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting how that works out.
But
Um,
I think it's fantastic that we actually have like to stay in those terms like a lingua franca today, which is English, of course. Most people in the world they have English as their as a second
right,
language. So that's like a common denominator. Most places you go, you can actually make a minimum of communication with people in English, in the especially in younger generations, obviously,
right,
who have learned it in the education system. So I think that English has become, yeah, the preferred
right,
second language everywhere, or in most places.
right,
And that's probably also that goes back to probably the British Empire as well,
right,
with um, having the empire all over the world.
right. So I mean, the colonialism, like everybody's like, well, we're not conquering actual territories anymore. It's cultural territories now that are being
Yeah,
conquered.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's very fascinating.
and that's all. Isn't that also the definition of memes?
Yes, yes,
That
yes,
it's ideas that prosper and are spread because they have a value that can be shared by people, and that's an interesting facet as well, that that ideas, just like genes, that the stronger ones, they prosper and spread, and the ones less equipped to adapt, they just fade away.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, fascinating. I love that. I love that. Yeah, it's always interesting conversation. Another thing we always ask every writer, and we don't need any numbers or anything like this, but we'd like to ask this question of all writers that come on: how do you make a living? Do you make any money off the books? You have to have a day job, Yeah, like how do you make a living? And again, we don't need any numbers or anything like that, but just
No,
it's
no,
tough out
but
there for writers. It's tough out there for
it
writers, and
is.
listeners
It
want to
is.
know, yeah, how you're doing it, and what you're getting out of it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's still my ambition to have my writing to pay for some of my budget, but I'm not even close. I'm not even beginning that.
right,
But fortunately, I, I as with my background in systems development, and
right,
also partly with the books I mentioned, that are
right, yeah,
the programming books. I had some rather some fair savings that I
right,
have been fortunate to invest in some. Again, had some the good luck of making some good investments and so on. So today I'm not really. I'm in a situation where I'm not really dependent on selling any books.
right,
So it would be nice also, as we talked about before, as a confirmation
Right.
of there being an interesting or a demand. But from an economic point of view, it's not make or break for me
Right.
to establish a name and a brand and so on.
Right.
So that's both good and bad. That maybe if I felt the pressure more, maybe I would be more
Yeah. Yeah.
active in the. But so I'm very fortunate in that, and that's also one of the backgrounds that I use as a tool to remind myself that because I'm in a situation where I actually don't have to make money from my books, that should actually inspire me to be more productive
And
with the
free.
books.
Yeah. Free and
And
experiment and yeah.
exactly, and not now I'm saying waste. It's a bad word, but not use my time and energy and resources on
Right.
on marketing the books that I have
Yes.
written and put behind me, instead of using my time and energy on writing some more. And maybe someday, yeah, someone will, maybe even after I'm dead, I don't know, but someone will read it. At least as a minimum, my friends and family,
Right.
and I will have the feeling that I have used my time and capacities in a productive. I will have the sensation, the sense that I haven't wasted
Right.
my time. In that way, I'm very fortunate. But I can say I'm only selling books when they are free.
Right.
That's the sad state
Yeah.
of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even the industry itself is struggling to figure out how to sell books right now. There used
Yeah,
to be a way that they did it. That way doesn't work anymore. And they've been scrambling for the last 2 decades to try and stop the bleeding from the hemorrhaging sales, the hemorrhaging, they're losing money, like they're not making as much as they used to. It's kind of, yeah, we're all in this boat. But I mean, you doing the international route too, I think, where that's an interesting perspective on publishing this way and doing the marketing, and you have to market in countries that you're not in, like it kind of that complicates it another level, than just, oh, you're writing in English and you're only going to the English speaking world, whereas you're taking the more there's, because this is published in multiple languages, right? This is, I would imagine, is published in Danish and all that. That's what they tell you to do when you're doing Amazon or something, or a self-published. But then, if you
yeah,
can't
no,
actually
only English.
translate it and you're using AI, and then it kind of screws up the translation, and you kind of, everybody in Danish or something, if you didn't speak it, they don't know what the hell you're doing because you used AI to translate it
Right.
from English. And yeah, it's so yeah, that's just an interesting perspective too, doing it internationally. That's another level to the all the work that it takes to do
Yeah,
this. Yeah, yeah.
and I think that's absolutely true. I think maybe I underestimated how much that extra level, how much extra work was actually in that extra level. I found the limitation of my own
Right.
English understanding and all the work that was in translating it. And I had some excellent help from some English colleagues that made a lot of editorial work and suggestions, also with idioms and daily phrases, and
Right.
so that really was invaluable for me.
Yeah.
But it was probably a bit
That's
too ambitious.
that's studying languages. This is a hobby as I do, with this kind of, that's the thing that everyone's like, oh, you can speak the language. but that would really struggle with is the cultural level of that language, the idioms, the phrases, the history that's being referenced when they say something. We know the English version or the American version or something of that, but then if you're going to this other language in another part of the world, well, that changes all that, and sometimes, like you said, they adopt the American idioms or the English speaking idioms and stuff, and that makes sense to you, but then there's the ones that you have to kind of learn culturally to be fluent, at least in the
Culturally,
language.
yes.
Yeah, that's the barrier to fluency, is the cultural understanding and the
Yeah, yeah,
references and the thousands of years of history that you don't know, and yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And that's why also that ties back into the same with the tradition, be it lingual or spiritual or even scientific. That that is an invaluable help if you are part, if you
right,
have a background in that tradition. If you think that you need to learn Hebrew to to understand the Bible and to get a spiritual understanding of the cosmos, then you are probably choosing an unrealistic route, saying you can spend the rest of your life learning this language, and as you say, then you have only started understanding the tradition and the references, the culture. You can't become Jewish, not even by learning Hebrew. You have,
right,
but if you are born as a part of a tradition, then that's an excellent stepping stone to further your own understanding of, because all the work that has been done already, you don't have to start from scratch. But you can't, especially as an adult person, you can't learn a new culture from scratch and expect to be part of that tradition and understanding that's that's unrealistic. Some maybe can, but I'm definitely I'm not
right.
in that position.
Yeah, it's one of my I love Harold Bloom, the American literary critic from Yale, who he passed away a few years ago, but he always said this in all his books, that if you're learning a language, you're learning a culture, essentially, that there is something baked into each phrase, each word. There's thousands of years of history and culture in that. And you're kind of, when you learn a language as a child, you don't even realize that you're learning all these things just through speaking the language or reading the language. And yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's an undersold aspect, especially in the academic side of literature. I think where there is this kind of, especially, I mean, still here in America, I'm sure they're not doing this over in Denmark, but in America right now, they're kind of lowering the standards for PhDs in literature. Used to be a huge
Mm.
language component to that. If you were going to get a PhD in literature, you were expected to be fluent in at least one other language. They've pushed that back so you don't have to be fluent in another
Ah,
language anymore. So it's a little bit easier, to get a
yeah,
PhD in
yeah,
literature now from the American universities. So it's
I see.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So we're kind of lowering the standard, and that was something he would always rail against. But yeah, interesting. I know that's a whole other podcast. We can do a whole podcast on this.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. The final
I
question
actually,
no, please go on. Please
yeah,
go on.
no, actually, to be fair, you talk about the lowering of standards. I think that's prevalent in all,
Yeah,
at least Western countries, maybe
yeah,
all countries. I don't know other cultures that well, but I see the same thing in Denmark and also here in Switzerland. That because people don't have the same literary backgrounds, and you have to lower standards
right,
and to enable people to go through that process. I mean, to become my father to become a priest, he had to learn Greek and Latin,
oh yeah,
and in addition to that, he learned French and German as well, and English, of course. They had to read, in Old Hebrew
right,
and Aramaic, the old scriptures from the Old Testament,
right,
and Greek, Old Greek for the New Testament, of course. And the priests at that time, they did that. and they had to today they don't do that. They had to lower it because it was too
Yes.
the demands were too high,
And it
and
was
that's
causing the number to drop, and it was about
yeah, yeah,
elevating the overall number. And yeah, that's it's yeah, I guess that's a problem everywhere now. Yeah. That's interesting how that happened. Yeah, I had a study in literature. There's when you read old books, old books, there'll be just a line in French or a line in Latin or something. That's because if you could read books back then, you probably spoke French and Latin and could read it and didn't need it to be translated or implied that they're
exactly,
spoken in French with italics or something like they do in kind of more modern texts, like the italics implying that it's a different
yeah,
language and but it's just written in English, and so yeah, even I was thinking like a James Baldwin book we did on the podcast, Giovanni's Room, where a lot of that's in French, where it's just a phrase, French, and they just start speaking in French. There's no translation, there's no thing. So you're reading it, and if you don't speak French, you kind of don't know what they're saying, and it was just kind of another level of I don't want to say intelligence, but like artistic merit, or I don't know if that's the
yeah,
right
yeah,
word either,
merits,
but
yeah,
yeah, just ambition maybe, or
yeah,
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 standard, yeah,
and
yeah,
also if you had access to publishing and to writing, you probably had some sort of a higher education.
right, right,
And back then, that would always, as you also said, that would always include Latin
right.
and probably French also, as you say, especially when it was the language of diplomacy and so on. But Latin, and
The
I sometimes, yeah,
language of the
yeah,
church, yeah, you have to learn the language of
yeah,
the
yeah,
church, yeah,
and the language of science in old
yeah,
days also. And actually, yeah, I learned it in high school. Learned it. I had it, and I often wish that I had remembered more because it gives you an understanding of a lot of other things and logic. And I believe there's even in the English language there are a lot of Latin words. But back then, I mean, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, he wrote a lot of his thesis and studies in Latin, as fluent as he did in
right,
his native language of Danish. He was as fluent.
right,
I mean, I'm not fluent in English. He was fluent in Latin, apart from Danish and French and German, of course. So these language had another value, perhaps. Language as related to literature and the also the traditions and the history books, learning about the world required Latin and languages as a starting point.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. The final question we ask everybody that comes on here, AO, is what are you working on now? What's taking up your creative energy and your time? If you feel free to share it. We've had writers that are
Yeah,
superstitious and yeah, don't want
certainly.
to. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, but no, I'm not superstitious or anything. Um, I've here over the last handful of months, I've worked a lot with the marketing bureau and the publishing, and it has been a very uh, enriching experience. I've really learned a lot, and I have had to park a lot of my writing and my brainstorming for my next novel. And I hope here after summer, starting in July, that I will can start focus on plotting everything down for my next novel. But it's still very abstract. I still want to write about the same themes with the transcendent and with the world as a projection. The same themes and the same tools for self-understanding, for understanding the purpose of life, or rather existence, the understanding of life seen in isolation as a biological phenomenon. So I hope to dive more to my mission over the next 6 to 8-10 months, and I actually also think of publishing some articles on these theories and
Yeah.
on the Medium or another platform like that, maybe to circumvent the carrier of the entertainment platform, the fiction, and go directly into sharing some of these ideas.
Yeah.
And maybe now I have an idea of what audience I can target using the fiction. I had hoped it would be way larger,
Right.
but then I think that in parallel I want to write some articles that I would publish as technical, philosophical, spiritual articles
Yeah.
that hopefully will have some value on their own, and then I will use the fiction as a reference to those articles for people wanting to dive more into the more hardcore explanations of stuff. So that's actually my and that's a plan I've actually redefined or come up with here over the last couple of weeks. I knew there was a new novel in the pipeline, and I just haven't been able. I quit my old job as a programmer for the same reason, because I couldn't do the juggle with many roles
Right.
and jump between the functions. So I was really sad that I had to quit my job, because I couldn't write. I have to be 100% focused on what I do in
Right.
order to do it in a quality I find satisfying for myself. It's probably not great literature, but I have some standards,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I can't multitask. It's as simple as that. So if I want to write, I really can't do anything else apart from that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, that was all I had. This has been fantastic. Where can people find your stuff? Drop your websites, social media handles, all of that. Where do you want people to go to find your stuff?
I'm on Facebook as and Instagram as A.O. Wagner author, with dots between each of the elements. And on my product page on Amazon, where the Karma Cantata, all 3 books can be purchased in paperback and ebook formats. They can find me there as well. So
Fantastic.
if they simply search for the Karma sequence as is the title of the first novel, and A.O. Wagner, I think they are bound to stumble into it somewhere.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. And that's all linked below as well, listeners down there. So go click it, go check the books out, go check out the
Perfect.
websites, all that good stuff. And AO, this has been a pleasure. It was a pleasure to meet you. All of that. Please come back anytime. Maybe we'll come back.
Thank
We'll
you.
do a little Crichton book or something. We'll do a little
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That would be super. Thank you, Andrew, for taking the time talking to me and listening to all my weird theories and
Yeah, yeah.
contemplations.
We love it on this show. We love that stuff on this show. So it was great having you.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's super.
fantastic.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile.
such a lack of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Bored. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavybored. That's right, Heavy Bored is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavybored.